Psalm 90 is a communal lament, of which there are about half a dozen in the Psalms. These prayers are meant to leave us in a posture of humility and receptiveness. God is often seen as being angry even in these Psalms, and people don't like to attribute anger to God, unless, of course, God's angry at somebody else that we're angry at. Then it's okay, God can be angry. If God is bigger than any of us, though, then let God be God. Maybe our inability to deal constructively with our own anger shouldn't keep God from having a full emotional life. Hear these words from Psalm 90. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn us back to dust and say, turn back, you mortals, for 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, or like a watch in the night. You sweep them away. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For we are consumed by your anger, by your wrath we are overwhelmed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your countenance. For all our days pass away under your wrath. Our years come to an end like a sigh. The days of our life are 70 years, or perhaps 80 if we are strong. Even then, their span is only toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger? Your wrath is as great as the fear that is due you. So teach us to count our days, that we may gain a wise heart. Turn, O Lord. How long? Have compassion on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, so that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad as many days as you have afflicted us, and as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be manifest to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and prosper for us the work of our hands. O God, prosper for us the work of our hands. Stop your whining. Quit complaining. Yeah, no one likes a whiner or a complainer. So why is it that so much conversation gravitates to this vortex? Most common subjects include the government, especially, if not exclusively, explaining about people we didn't vote for. Other popular complaining topics include the traffic, the wait at the doctor's office, the doctor even, the retail clerk, those people. I think complaining is something people do in part because we've never learned or we were never taught to lament. The pandemic in which we are living creates great uncertainty, enormous grief, trauma. And sometimes we experience the trauma, it's just a little trickle, background noise. Sometimes it's a tsunami. It is constant, and it takes a toll. Emotional, intellectual, physical, and spiritual. There's so many things we justifiably complain about. For people of faith, I think it's an invitation for us to go deeper. We don't and we won't usually go deeper because it's scary. It's terrifying to step into lament. More often, we are forced into its posture of surrender, of rage even, and overwhelming grief. Aren't we supposed to keep calm and carry on? Have faith, everything will work out for the best. While I am ultimately a person who does believe that God wants our well-being, wants your well-being, I also know that bad things happen to really good people all the time. So if you hold to any of those pithy platitudes in an absolute way, like that's your default for everything, I invite you to please read Voltaire's novel Candide. It's an antidote to the insipid philosophy of his day that continues on till today. Everything is for the best in this best of all possible worlds. Better yet, I'm sure it's on YouTube, the PBS Leonard Bernstein version of the operetta Candide. Kristen Chenoweth plays Cunegonde, and Patti LuPone plays the woman with one buttocks. Now I know you want to watch it. Yes, that's her name in the play. Time is a bit muddy these days, but I think it was in the month of April that this happened. I'd been working to be more proficient on the church website, and our former office administrator, Rafael Reyes, graciously reached out to me and offered help. His coaching and instructional skills. I had so many questions. And with every question, Raphael patiently listened and every time responded, well, that's a good question. He's the Mr. Rogers of tech. Confident I could do the next thing, I flew solo the very next day, and I entered through the back door of the church website, and I began to work, looking at my notes. Then I do this, and then I do that, but something didn't quite work right. And for 30 minutes, I kept trying. Try harder. Well, after 40 minutes, I noticed a couple of tears starting to leak out of my eyes. Well, I didn't feel particularly undone. I checked, well, I don't feel upset. But the tears were telling a different story. Breathe, I told myself. You can do this, I coached myself. I got ready to look at the work I'd done. I clicked preview the changes, and I got to the page, and nothing was there. It was gone. Completely gone. Poof! Somehow I had erased an entire page off of the church website. Where did it go? It's going to be okay. Raphael can fix this. That became my mantra for the next few hours. Where did it go? It's going to be okay. Raphael can fix this. But the tears had now become a steady flow. And in spite of my confidence that the harm was not irreparable, Raphael could and would indeed make all things renew on the website, the tears wouldn't stop. Well, I employed every trick I had learned so far in my life for dealing with trauma like this. I had trauma resilience training, tricks from that, from compassion practice, and more. But the tears, they wouldn't stop. Oh, I tried to interrupt this pattern. I did the laundry. I cleaned the kitchen. I did so much. Deep breathing. Honestly, it was a terrifying experience, experiencing it myself and watching myself experience it. And I began to wonder, I wonder if this is what a nervous breakdown is. And then this thought passed through the room. I wonder if Mike's going to have to take me somewhere today. I was inconsolable for over 2 hours. Finally, exhausted from trying to fix it, I laid on the floor in the living room, I reached for my phone, and I turned on some music. I gave up, and I gave in. I selected John Rutter's Requiem, and a Requiem is a mass for the dead. This is a sung mass for the dead, and you may be wondering, why would you pick something that's about grieving when you're already a mess? I think that's a really good question. But when the marriage of music and words came out of that teeny tiny speaker on my phone, the tears of desolation were transformed. I had finally surrendered into the grief that I had apparently been ignoring. It was about way more than the website, way more. And that was just the chink in the dam. Spiritual writers and guides have for centuries described tears this way. There are tears of desolation and tears of consolation. Lament is allowing space for tears of desolation to have their due so that tears of consolation can follow. Weeping may last for a night, but joy comes in the morning. The weeping continued, but the quality of the tears changed. They were now tears of consolation. Lord, have mercy. Kyrie eleison, the choir sang. Out of the depths have I called unto thee, O God. Hear my prayer. Hear the voice of my complaint, they sang, a lament. Now I was being held in the sacred space of words and music, married. I thought I was making room for managing the multiple stresses brought on by the pandemic. I thought I was sufficiently tending my spirit. Boy, was I wrong. I was forced to a place of surrender, and that scared me. Apparently, I was resisting. Surrender is not a trait, nor is it a practice that is encouraged in our culture. Work hard, compete for the best grade, because I knew growing up there were only so many A's in the classroom, and by golly, I was going to get one of them. Second place tries hardest. I heard that a lot in my life. We never hear, allow, receive, surrender. In the good old US of A, surrender is blasphemous. The Christian faith is an invitation to surrender. Look at the cross. Can we be vulnerable and safe at the same time? Putting off lament is not something I recommend. But we do put it off because at its core there is surrender to what is. Christian worship is in part practicing surrender. I don't know, maybe that's one of the reasons we're not so popular. But we practice surrender so we can be born anew in the living Christ. Listening to the deep cries of our own spirit, even surrendering to them, is a clear path to God who longs to meet us in our suffering. This is essential work, and we resist what is essential. Spiritual guide and writer James Finley says, the essential never imposes itself. The non-essential is constantly imposing itself. What imposed itself on me that day were all the pressures, and it wasn't until I chose to give in, to turn to what I was feeling, that there was room enough for what he calls the non-impositional intimacy of the essential, what one could call God. In the world, usually it comes crowding in, it overtakes us, and we don't live in a world that's conducive to paying attention to the essential. It's countercultural. We have to create a culture in our own heart. Consciously seek to be stabilized in this world. I had not done enough of that. It takes practice, intentionality, silence. So hard to do that. Tears even. Receptivity, surrender. We are living in a time of sustained trauma. Lamentation is a spiritual practice that is essential work for such a time as this. It is essential for resilient people and for people who want to build resilience. Lamentation is exercising the muscles that make our spirits more spacious for the Spirit of God that longs to sustain us and transform us. Now, my advice is do not wait until you're forced to do this work. Put yourself in its way. I had to be forced in a way, and I'm glad it happened. It was a wake-up call. It's not a land we have to live in, but it is wise to visit the depth of our own emotional and spiritual landscapes. Now, I needed to stay there for a while, apparently, and let God do what I needed to be done. A little more sculpting of the stone that I am. The don't worry, be happy approach to life cannot sustain us for this now that we are in and the uncertain future that lies ahead. We require something of much greater substance. Our faith tradition bequeaths us lamentation as a practice to carry us to the depths of our suffering where God longs to meet us. Not when we're first across the finish line, not when we've successfully achieved another achievement, gotten that job, gotten that promotion. No. Imagine this. God longs to meet you in your despair, in your rage, in your anxiety. Josh Brockway is the Director of Spiritual Life and Discernment for the Church of the Brethren, and I ran across an article he wrote about lamentation as a spiritual practice of the faith community. These prayers, he writes, leave us in a posture of humble and trusting expectation. And for me, the Requiem was that threshold to lamentation. Resolution is not something of our own making. We are to make room for God to be at our tables. These communal prayers name both the struggle and the hope. They prevent us from being dismissive of the strife. Oh, it's all going to work out for the best. And prevent us from being defeatist about it. The more things change, the more they stay the same. There's a human tendency to rush in to fix and forget what is essential. To pause, to listen, to be still, and know God. Lamentation is brutally honest prayer. When NBA teams, NBA refs, when the Dodgers and the Giants didn't play, that was lament. That was a lamentation. It was pausing to listen to their own hearts, to the hearts of their fellow players, to each other, to the cries of pain and suffering they are hearing outside their bubbles. If you get an email bulletin of this service, you also received an invitation to share a lamentation today. I invite us to bear witness to the laments, the suffering in our own community. Despair and loneliness. Grief, rage for my little friend who was one of my daughter's best friends, diagnosed with cancer last year, with surgery, radiation, and chemo, told that she was cancer-free, and now, 2 years later, it's back. She's 40, she has a 6-year-old daughter, and we are devastated. I miss my wife of 65 years. My oldest sister, age 84, has Alzheimer's, lives in a skilled nursing facility near my niece in another state. My niece is unable to visit her since March. And because she is confused, she can't talk to her by phone or Zoom. It is not likely I will ever see her again. I lament that our lives and our society are run by and for corporations. I'm upset about Steve Mena not getting better. He is so young. I lament that there is still injustice for a person living with different abilities. I lament the housing situation I was waiting so long for was not for my own place, but for the shelter. I am lamenting the racism that still exists and the way it divides people. We bear witness. We step in as God's emissaries, as Christ's ambassadors, to bear each other's burdens. Lamentation of the community brings us to a place where we are more open to look and listen for what God is already doing. Well, the community of the church made it possible for that Requiem Mass that has gotten me through 2 really tough times in my life. Rudder's Requiem was paid for by the church. It was made possible because the church made it happen. I was brought back by music created for church worship, by a community of which I'm a part. Lamentation of the community brings us to the spaciousness of God's invincible love. And we know then and there, we are reminded again that this love will never let us go. And this love sends us out to witness to the radical idea that there is hope for this world in the peace and love of Jesus Christ. Amen.